Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paskachadesha Charine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha
September 1st, 2019, in Dublin, and we're going to be examining Vaisnava Qualities, which fits very well with what we ended with yesterday. And what we're looking at today is a list of the 26 qualities of a devotee. And you'll notice that as we go through this, that there's, as to be expected, a big overlap with the qualities we looked at in our last session yesterday. But there's also some qualities in this list that it wasn't there, and some qualities on that list that wasn't here. And the reality is that there's many different lists of the qualities of a devotee, the qualities of a liberated soul. Where else would we find, what other lists besides these 26 qualities are there that you're aware of?
The nature of instruction of the loving exchanges between devotees.
Okay, I don't know if that would be exactly qualities of devotees. We're going to talk about that in our second session. But that might include some of them.
Sri Upanishad in chapter 10? No.
Yes, in verse 10 of the Upanishad. Yes, there's a list. And do you know where that list is from? That list didn't start in the purport of the verse 10 of the Upanishad, but I'm really, thank you for that. It comes from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verses 8 through 12. It's the same list. So that's another list of the qualities of a saintly person, the qualities of a devotee. Yes. And the other places. Okay, Bhagavad Gita 16, 1 through 3, the divine qualities. Then Lord Chaitanya, talking to Sanatana Goswami, gives 9 symptoms of bhava. So that's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the end of Madhulila. Then also in the Nectar of Devotion, there's a list of 64 qualities of Krishna. And of those 64, how many are also qualities of the jiva, of the soul? Yeah, but it's 50 qualities. So it's about 78%, something like that. I forget the percentage, but it's 50 qualities. So there's 50 qualities there of the soul, which are fully manifested when you're a realized soul. And these lists are not all the same. Yes? Everyone here today, you're okay with my English speed?
Yeah.
Pronunciation, you're able to understand me?
Yeah.
Okay. I assume there's some non-native English speakers here. Am I doing okay? All right. Because I'm speaking in a different accent from that which you're accustomed to. So why this list? I don't know, just a list I picked for this seminar. So this list is repeated in several places. And just the other day I heard Srila Prabhupada giving a class where he was talking about that one way we can judge our advancement in bhakti is to what extent we're actually manifesting these specific lists, this 26 qualities of a devotee list. But there are other lists, and this is not the only list, so do keep that in mind as well. All right? This is not the list. This is a list. If any of you come from countries without articles, I hope you understand what I'm talking about. There's a lot of languages that don't have any articles. So why are we studying the qualities of a devotee? Well, several reasons. First of all, oops. Are you okay? Was that the chair you were sitting on?
Was the chair?
Not plastic.
Was it a chair that broke?
Yeah.
Oops.
The method.
Maybe that should be put away somewhere. So one reason for studying these lists is, as Srila Prabhupada said in the lecture that I heard, I think it was yesterday, that it's a way that we can gauge to what extent am I making progress. Srila Prabhupada would often say that we are the best judge of our own spiritual progress. He said, just like if you're eating, and you're the only one who knows if you're satisfied, right? Somebody else can't say, oh, you haven't eaten enough, or you've eaten too much, or, we each have our different amounts that we can eat, yeah? People will look at me saying, Urmila, you're not eating anything. It's like, I know how much I can eat. And we know when we have a feeling of being satisfied. And nobody else probably said, you don't need a certificate from others. So Krishna consciousness is like that, and this is one of the ways that we can gauge. It's also like if you're going on a journey, and there's landmarks. Now, like every morning here, I've been taking a walk down to the park, which was locked this morning. But, the street isn't exactly straight. And I have certain landmarks I notice. Okay, I'm at that statue, and this turn in the road, and this, and that sign, and therefore I know, am I going the right way? Wherever I go in the world, I take a walk in the morning, and I always have to pay attention, right? And I was recently on the island of Kirk in Croatia, and I thought I had paid attention. I thought I had, and you have to pay attention backwards, You have to turn around sometimes and look. What is the road going to look like when I'm coming back? Yeah, and I thought I had done that. I really did, and somehow I was walking down to the sea. Somehow when I came back, I missed my sign. I missed my landmark. And I was I didn't have my phone with me, and where am I? I thought, well, maybe if I just sit tight here by the sea, my host will realize that I'm gone. And anyway, I did end up finding my way back. But, we want these landmarks on the path so that we can see, am I going the right way? And to switch metaphors, Rupa Goswami talks about how when you're planting flowers, vegetables, that there can also be weeds that look like the plant. So the first time in my life I ever grew things, how old was I? 21 maybe? And I decided I was going to grow flowers. I was going to grow marigolds and zinnias. And so my husband plowed a little plot. And not being at all experienced and not asking anyone who was experienced, I just put the seeds in this plot. And then the whole plot was covered with this green carpet. And I thought, oh, I don't have any idea what a baby marigold plant or a baby zinnia plant looks like. And this was way before Google. And so, I just had to kind of wait till the plants grew up a bit before I could pull out the weeds. And then, of course, they were harder to pull out. So another reason to study these qualities is so we can tell, what's a good sign and what's not a good sign. If there's things coming up in us that are opposite to these qualities, then we're doing something wrong. So they tell us, how much am I progressing on the right path, and am I making a wrong turn somewhere? Because there are things that can look like bhakti but aren't, and can get us off track. We can think, oh yeah, that was the sign I saw, and that's what happened to me in Kirk. And I ended up in a different part of the island. So it's the kind of thing that we want to be able to judge, and we're ultimately the only one who can judge this. Although we certainly can also ask other people. Now, there's yet another reason why we want to look at these good qualities, and that is perhaps you could say a very selfish reason, but there it is. That the reason we suffer in this world is because of our bad qualities. So we all know that our suffering comes from our karma, but where does our bad karma come from? Why do I do things against universal law and therefore get a reaction So I know none of us believe that we have really bad qualities. It's kind of a universal thing that people don't believe that they have bad qualities. I posted something on Facebook yesterday about domestic violence, and then one of my friends posted a picture of herself with her face all beat up, and that she's in the process of divorcing her husband. So I know this family. Anyway, he contacts me this morning, and he was telling me, no, I never beat my wife. So I said, okay. I said, has there ever been any violence? He said, well, she's hit me sometimes. He said, we've had some fights, and usually she's the one who hits me. I said, okay, usually must mean that sometimes you hit her. And then he says, well, in 34 years of marriage, I might have hit her sometimes. Okay. But that was only because she wouldn't stop the argument. Okay. So this is what we tend to do, isn't it? We can see that in someone else. We're like, right? Hare Krishna. But we do the same thing ourselves. We make excuses for ourselves. We say, okay, yes, I did, usually I'm a nice person, I don't do anything wrong. But if I do something wrong, there's some sort of extenuating circumstances. Or, I had good motives. My motives were good, my intentions were good. It just didn't turn out right. Or there were some other circumstances going on, and, we always have some excuses for ourselves. But factually, the reason we do bad things, I'm sorry to say, sometimes it is just something that we don't intend to do. That is the case, certainly sometimes. But the reason we do bad things that get us bad karma is that we have bad qualities. And recognizing that and dealing with that is absolutely essential in making spiritual progress, and it is the one thing that nobody wants to do, and it's therefore the thing that keeps people from progressing to higher stages of spirituality. It is the thing. Like yesterday we talked about doing things that look like bhakti but aren't bhakti. There's some other part of the path. We can talk about offenses. But it all boils down to refusing to face the fact that I'm holding on to false ego, and holding on to false ego means I'm holding on to all the things that go along with false ego, which are bad qualities. So it is because I'm holding on to envy, it's because I'm holding on to lust, because I'm holding on to greed, because I'm holding on to anger, that therefore I do things that net me bad karma and bring me suffering. And there's just no other reason at all. Again, we can see this in other people. We have no problem at all seeing this in somebody else. Right? Am I correct? Yeah. No problem. And somehow, I am the shining exception in the world. Which is just highly unlikely, logically speaking. But, I have no problem saying this person did something that was wrong, and we can see that their motive was actually lust, or their motive was actually greed, or their motive... Yes? Everybody can see that about other people? So, yeah. Sorry if this wasn't what you planned on doing with your Sunday morning. But, this is the problem in ourselves as well. And Krishna talks about that we take shelter of our bad qualities. He uses the word kam ashrita in the 16th chapter, and he uses the word ahankara ashrita. So ashraya is a shelter. That we actually take shelter in these bad qualities. That we think that they're somehow going to do something for us. Just like anger. We think, if I hold on to anger, it will motivate me to fight against injustice. If I let go of my anger, I won't care about injustice anymore. Now, that's not really being fair to ourselves, because why couldn't we care about injustice because we love people who are being mistreated? Why couldn't love for the victim motivate just as much as anger against the perpetrator? Do we really need the anger? And the answer is we don't need to hold on to those things. Or someone will say, well, I've got to hold on to guilt because it keeps me from doing things that are wrong. Why couldn't I have gratitude motivate me from doing things that are wrong? There's all kinds of ways to motivate ourselves without these bad qualities. But we feel that we need them. I remember this one man, a devotee, telling me if I gave up my lust, I'd also give up my wife. That my motive for taking care of my family is my lust. And these are very hard things, to admit in ourselves. And they're very hard things to let go of. They're hard things to let go of because they're hard to admit. It's hard to admit that the way I'm motivating myself to do what I want to do is through anger, through fear, through illusion, through guilt, through lust, and these sort of things. It's very, very difficult to see these things. But once you start seeing them, it's so liberating that then it becomes easier and easier and easier. Once you take that first step and you actually see, wow, I'm taking shelter of fear, I'm taking shelter of envy, I'm taking shelter of illusion, I'm taking shelter of anger, I'm taking shelter of lust, thinking that this quality will help me to achieve my goals. Once we actually see that very clearly, that I'm the one holding on. Srila Prabhupada's guru, Bhaktisiddhanta, said, we're holding the tree. We're saying, help, 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 free me, free me, free me. But we're the one, holding on to the tree. So once one sees this the first time, one finds that it's actually very freeing. It really isn't this terrible, terrible thing to say, oh my goodness, I'm taking shelter of these bad qualities. But the other interesting thing is that in one sense there is no bad quality at all. All bad qualities are misuse of something good. The bad qualities are all manifestations from Durga, but Durga is an expansion of Radharani. So all bad qualities are taking something that there's nothing that's intrinsically, inherently evil. There's no evil thing. We don't have a concept of a Satan or a devil or something like that. We don't have a concept that there's just some evil that's a competitor with God. That God's a nice guy, but he's got this eternal battle going on with this evil dude, and they're kind of duking it out, and sometimes the evil dude wins, and that's why there's storms and diseases, and God just going, oh, sorry, I lost that battle, It's not the reality. We do have a concept of a person who's in charge of evil, and I wouldn't be surprised if concepts of the devil came from that. We do have a person who's in charge of evil and evil beings and has a trident. But he himself is not evil. He's in charge of false ego, and his wife is Durga Devi. But he himself is not evil. So our understanding is, like Prabhupada said, evil is God's backside. It's his back. That when you look away from God, then what was good becomes evil. Just like we were defining illusion yesterday. Yes, we defined illusion yesterday as seeing things not in relationship to Krishna. So as soon as I see something not in relationship to Krishna, then that becomes evil. And the ability to do that is also Krishna's energy. Well, let's use a very simple example. Let's take the quality of courage. Courage is a universally revered quality. Even criminals hate cowardice. So there are criminals who might be, greed is good. But there's nobody who says that being a coward is good. Even really criminal people. But what does courage mean? Well, courage means that you're taking some sort of risk. You're risking something to yourself. Like you're running in front of the bullets to save your buddy on the battlefield. Now that same thing, if you run in front of a car because somebody dared you, that becomes a bad quality. Or if you're risking being caught by the police to rob a shop, that's a bad quality. Then it becomes recklessness. But what's the real difference between courage and recklessness? Only the object. What are you risking yourself for? If you risk your life to run in a burning building to save a baby, or you risk your life to rob a jewelry store, in both cases you're risking your life. But in one you're a hero and in one you're a criminal. So it's exactly the same quality, but one is used properly and one is not used properly. Does this make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. So as the more we're using our qualities for Krishna, the more they become good qualities, and the more we're using our quality selfishly, the more they become bad qualities. So if we learn how to do this, our lives transform. Even if you just want to enjoy the world and have good karma, one wants to develop good qualities. One wants to turn the bad qualities to good qualities. Of course, as long as we talked about this yesterday, as long as we're selfishly motivated, we will not have absolutely good qualities. Because when we're threatened enough, we'll give them up and do the flip side of them. So in order to have good qualities all the time, we have to be surrendered to Krishna. And this is one reason why the devotee has no karma. The devotee is not generating any karma because they don't have any bad qualities. Because what are karmic reactions? Karmic reactions are to reform us. If we're just getting karmic reactions for innocently hurting others, that wouldn't be very fair, would it? What am I getting karmic reactions for? That I have some ill motive that's pushing me to do something harmful. That's what and so the karmic reaction is to reform my character and to give up that ill motive and to give up that bad quality. You know, God isn't like just vengeful and stupid. You know, it's not that you're going to get some bad karmic reaction for accidentally bumping into somebody as you're walking or something. That's not what's going on. Just like we talk about that people, if you kill animals and eat them, then you have to take birth as that animal and be killed. So the meat eater is lacking what? Compassion. They're lacking compassion, they're lacking empathy, so they need to be put in a karmic situation where they'll experience it themselves to go, oops, that's what it feels like. And to come to the point of saying, you know, I don't want to do that to somebody else just for some selfish enjoyment on my part. But if we don't have a selfish desire, what is there to reform? So that's why we want to look at these good qualities. And then our other question, we talked about this yesterday very briefly. Some of you weren't here yesterday, so we'll just mention it again. That all these good qualities develop naturally as a concomitant factor of bhakti. And you can see why they would, because in bhakti, I'm transforming my inner attitude from I want to satisfy myself independently of Krishna to I want to satisfy Krishna. I want to satisfy myself by satisfying Krishna. And ultimately, it's so satisfying to satisfy Krishna that I forget about satisfying myself because I'm already satisfied. Something like if you worked for a really good company, I don't know how many of them there are in the world, but if you worked, let's just say hypothetically, you worked for a really, really good company and they paid you enough salary so you just didn't need to worry about money. They gave you a nice place to work. They gave you everything you needed for your job. They gave you vacations. They had a party for you on your birthday. The only thing you need to worry about is doing a good job, right? If you're just taken care of by an employer, by a family member, you know, if your parents take care of you or your spouse or whatever, if someone's just taking care of you so that you just don't have to think about it. I mean, if you've got good parents, the kid is not thinking, am I going to eat? Am I going to get shoes? Am I going to get toys? They're just peaceful. The idea is that children are just taken care of so they can concentrate on their studies. And the idea is that employees are just taken care of so they can concentrate on their work, right? That's the idea. So when we surrender to Krishna, it's like that. We're just taken care of. And that way we forget about our own needs because there's no reason to think about them. They're automatically there. Prabhupada said the devotee doesn't ask for anything, doesn't need anything, because they're fully satisfied. It's not that they just become like this table's not asking for anything, but that's not because it's satisfied, it's because it's not alive. It doesn't have a sense of need. It doesn't have a sense of want. But the pure devotee doesn't become a table or a rock. The pure devotee is just, I've got everything. I'm full. And so their whole focus is just on service and love. Yeah? And when one loses all selfishness because of being completely satisfied, then one has all good qualities in all situations. Everybody follow that logic? And it's a degree. So the more that I feel satisfied, the more that I feel faith and trust that there's an all-good God who's taking care of me, the less fear and concern I have about myself. And therefore, the more I manifest good qualities in all situations. But if I'm afraid, well, I've got to look out for myself, then I might say, hey, I got to look out for myself right now. I can't be Mr. Nice Guy right now because I have to look out for myself. So the more I'm feeling like that I've got to be my own protector and I have to take my interest, that the more difficulty I'm going to have manifesting good qualities. So as I take up bhakti, the good qualities manifest automatically. They're part of the soul. They're not something you learn from someone else. They're part of ourselves. We are naturally full of good qualities. Practically speaking, all the qualities of God are in us because we're part of Him. Just like my finger has the same DNA as the rest of my body. It's part of my body. So I have all the qualities, practically speaking, all the qualities of God. And as I become one in interest with Krishna, then they come automatically. So then why talk about these at all? Well, we said talk about them as benchmarks as to how we're progressing. That's one thing. But for the other reasons I said about talking about them, besides just a landmark on our journey, sounds like we want to do something deliberate to develop these qualities. Well, that's also true. And again, we talked about that yesterday, and I gave the analogy of shopping. Like if you're shopping and you're buying yogurt, some yogurt, I don't know, in this country, do you have some yogurt that has gelatin in it? No, in America, some yogurt has animal, slaughterhouse products in it, like gelatin. So if you're going to buy something like that, you want to check it out and see, does it have that in it or not? So as part of becoming a devotee, as part of loving Krishna, I also want to see that I'm acting properly. Yes, those good qualities naturally develop, automatically develop as part of bhakti. But what that also means is that as part of my bhakti, I naturally work on them. I'm not working on them separately from my bhakti. So I'm not working on my good qualities because I'm motivated that if I work on my good qualities, then I'll get good karma and I'll be a happier person in the world. That is true, but that's a separate consideration. But if I'm thinking, I'm working on these good qualities so Krishna will be pleased with me, just like we read yesterday, right? Such a person is very dear to me. Such a person is very dear to me. At the end of each of those verses. Y'all remember those verses, those who were here yesterday? One who's a kind friend to all living entities is very dear to me. Oh, I want Krishna to be happy with me, therefore I'll be kind. Clear? Yeah? Okay? So these are benchmarks, landmarks for our advancement, and they're also things as part of our process of bhakti that we should work on them. Now, if you're not interested in bhakti, work on them for your good karma. Good karma, in an ultimate sense, is about also what's pleasing to the Lord. So even if you work on things for selfish purposes, if you do the right thing even for a wrong purpose, it does help one. We talked about different steps on the ladder in different ways. It does help one to eventually maybe come to the point of, hey, what am I doing this for? I'm spending so much time trying to develop good qualities. is there some higher purpose for which I could do it? Like Prabhupada says, if you give charity, eventually you may say, I wonder where the best place to give charity is. And it might bring you eventually that tendency to give charity, which one may do for one's good karma, may eventually bring you to the point in saying, if I give things to the Lord, that might be the best use of my giving tendency. All right, so I want to look at some of these qualities. And let's look at the second sheet here before we look at the specific qualities. And how do we develop these qualities? What's the process? So first of all, our qualities have to do with what Prabhupada says are the three aspects of the subtle body or the mind: thinking, feeling, and willing. So it's not just what we do. This one here that says developing Vaisnava qualities. Yeah, flip it over to the second page. So then it will look like this. You don't have that one? You could just maybe share. Okay, thank you. So it's wise to keep in mind that whatever we want to change in ourselves involves these three things, not just behavior. If we try to change behavior without changing our thoughts and emotions, it doesn't last. My thinking and my feeling is going to manifest as behavior. And not taking these three into account is one of the prime reasons why people fail in trying to make any changes in themselves. And you can see how all of these are very much part of bhakti. We talked a lot yesterday about chapter 12, about thinking of Krishna and having attachment to Krishna. So, what do I choose to think about? What sort of emotions and desires, what kind of feelings and desires do I cultivate in myself? And then stories of people with good qualities is very, very helpful to developing our own good qualities. Stories are one of the most powerful ways to change human behavior, and stories can change entire societies. You can change the laws and the morality of entire societies by stories. There are things going on today that were not acceptable 20 years ago simply because of stories. They'll a movie, a TV show, a book about, these people are doing this, these people are doing that, and then, okay. And people's mentality will totally shift. A good example is abortion. So, when I was a kid, abortion was illegal everywhere. So why is abortion becoming legal? Because there's stories. If people talk about what abortion is, nobody would make it legal. And it's interesting that the people fighting to stop abortion, they mostly focus on just telling medical facts. But you notice the people for abortion, they focus completely on stories. They never talk about medical facts. There's this 13-year-old, and she was raped by her uncle, and she got pregnant, and what was she going to do? And she had an illegal abortion, and she died. Right? Isn't it like that? Right? Or this woman found out that her child was defective, and the child was going to be born with some kind of problem, and so she, in great agony, and, with great sorrow, and great regret because she had wanted this baby, and she went and had an abortion. And it's hard to read those stories and remain against abortion. It's actually very hard to be able to say, hey, you just killed somebody. That's not cool. The stories change our way of thinking. And this is true across the board. It changes laws. It changes laws, it changes moral standards, and therefore, from the beginning of time, cultures have passed on their values through stories. In every culture, before there was television and internet, people would sit around in the evening, gather in their village and sit around in the evening and hear stories. People used to read stories to their children before they went to bed. I mean, this was one of the main ways in which cultural values are transmitted. And we find the scriptures are full of stories, right? The whole Bhagavatam, it's all a story. It's about Maharaj Pariksit, and it's quite a story too. Maharaj Pariksit is cursed to die, and then there's stories within those stories, and they're very emotionally engaging stories. Stories within stories within stories. The Bhagavad Gita is a story, and again, it's a very emotionally engaging story that Arjuna's facing his grandfather and his guru on the battlefield. And that, like you were quoting from the Ishopanishad, the Ishopanishad is a little harder to read. There's no story. Or nectar of instruction. But when you read these scriptures that are stories, we're drawn into that. Now, how does this work? It works because, first of all, when we hear a story, we drop our defenses. Like earlier, I was saying how we're all motivated by bad qualities and selfishness. And I'm sure a lot of us, hearing that, we put up all these walls and go, I don't want to hear that, because if I hear that, then I'll feel bad about myself and I won't have good self-esteem. And I'm supposed to have good self-esteem, and so that will be really a bad thing for me. So I just not going to hear that. Or maybe I'll think about that as applying to somebody else, but not to me. We have all these defenses that come up whenever we get direct instruction. But with stories, we lose that completely, because it's not about me, it's about somebody else, and it's just a story. We let down our defenses. We let the instruction come in. And we all enjoy stories. I mean, Krishna enjoys stories. He hears stories every day. He has entertainment at night too, where he hears stories. And his whole existence is big stories with unfolding Leela and so forth. So we all have a love for stories. And the other interesting thing that happens, I'm sure you all know this, that when we imagine ourselves doing something, we get a lot of the benefit physiologically as if we were actually doing that. You all know that, right? And we do that naturally. If we're planning something, we mentally go through the thing. Yes? We mentally rehearse. And athletes do this very intentionally. So they'll mentally rehearse, how am I going to hit the ball? And if they put electrodes on the athletes, they find that their muscles are engaging about 2/3 as if they were actually doing it. It's been found that if we're, hearing a story, watching a story, reading a story, that our brain will create a situation as if we're actually doing it. And we've all had the experience of reading, hearing, watching a story where our body reacts physiologically as if we were actually experiencing the story, yeah? Something scary happens, you go, or your heart starts, or you start sweating, right? Or you're laughing, as if you were in the story. What's happening is that on a physiological level, it's almost as if we were experiencing it. So whatever stories we hear, read, watch, we're practicing. Exactly the same way, if you're going to go for a job interview, and, okay, let's see, I'm going to sit down. We're rehearsing it. Whenever we read, hear, or watch a story, it is a rehearsal for us, for life. We may not think that. We may think, I'm just relaxing and getting entertained. That's not what's going on at all. What's going on is that on a subtle level, we're rehearsing whatever we're seeing, hearing, or watching. So the more that we can read, hear, see stories about heroes who have these good qualities, then the more we're rehearsing that ourselves. It doesn't mean there can't be any bad guys in the story, but we have to not be identifying with them. It was a big thing when I was a kid that there was some story made about criminals where the criminals were the hero of the movies. And it was about actual historical criminals. It's called Bonnie and Clyde. And it was a big thing that the robbers and the murderers were the heroes of the movie. I mean, they got killed in the end. But they said, you know, people watching this movie, they're going to identify with the killers. And it's a fact that if we're identifying with the bad guys, we're practicing to be a bad guy. So this is a very effective way of getting good qualities. Read, hear, watch stories about people with good qualities. It becomes part of us on a very subtle level, and it's a much more effective way to change ourselves than direct instruction. Even direct instruction to ourselves. I want you to be a good person, Urmila. It's not as effective. What kind of friends we have? Behavior is contagious. I mean, it's found to be contagious even over long distances. So if you have a lot of friends who smoke, even if they live thousands of miles away, and you just communicate with them over the internet, you're more likely to smoke. The same is true for obesity. If you have friends who are obese, you're more likely to become obese. Divorce is contagious. If you have friends who divorce, you're more likely to divorce. This is just social science research, very firm statistics. So behavior is contagious. If your friends meditate, if your friends exercise, you're more likely to meditate and exercise. If your friends give in charity, you're more likely to give in charity. If your friends are kind, you're more likely to be kind. So to choose our friends. And not just general friends, but going out of our way to serve people who have these qualities, especially more than ourselves. And then being able to recognize these qualities. All right, what I would like to do now, so you have this other paper that says the qualities of a devotee. And what I've done, there's no Sanskrit diacritics here. I made this list a very long time ago before I was using diacritic fonts. And what I've done here is taken the translation of these qualities, because these same 26 qualities are listed in different places. So they're in Madhya 22. This is where Sanatana Goswami is explaining them, where Lord Chaitanya is explaining them to Sanatana Goswami. They're also explained by Lord Kapila Dev in the 3rd canto, chapter 15. They're also explained in the 11th canto, chapter 11. They're also listed in other places in Bhagavatam, but listen in Bhagavatam, particularly canto 4, chapter 20. So we took all the places where these are listed and saw how Prabhupada translated them. Obviously, in the 11th canto, they're translated by Prabhupada's disciples. So the 11th canto are from Prabhupada's disciples, the others are all from Prabhupada, because Prabhupada would often translate the same Sanskrit term in somewhat different ways. And I thought that looking at the different ways that it's being translated gives us a little bit deeper and more holistic view of what these qualities mean. So what I'd like to do now is open this up to all of you. And if you can look at this list and tell me which of these qualities you'd like us to discuss. We won't have time to do all of them, but just taking from you which of them you find interesting and you'd like to discuss. And I'm going to remind you all that this is not the list of devotee qualities, it is a list. Mild. All right, mridu. Oh. Interesting. Mridu can also mean like very delicate. So there's a verse that I sing pretty much every morning about how the gopis' arms are mridu. They're very delicate. They're very tender. It can mean like someone who's sort of young. So without being harsh. So if we think about this in terms of like the austerities of speech. So does anyone know what the austerities of speech are in the Bhagavad Gita? There's 5 austerities of speech in the mode of goodness.
Satisfaction.
That's the mind.
Oh, speech.
That's you got the austerity of goodness for the mind, satisfaction. And of course, you picked the one I have the most trouble with. What?
Speaking words which are pleasing to hear.
Yes, so the words pleasing is under, there's 2. There's pleasing and not agitating. So pleasing is about the content, is about the message, And not agitating is about the language. So just like today, I don't know if this is true in Ireland, but I know it's true in America. People are now very proud of cursing in their talk. Is that across the Atlantic?
Yeah.
Okay. So the people speaking with very harsh language. You know, when I was a child, that was kind of reserved for certain classes of society. It wasn't, the people in general didn't speak like that. And now it's become sort of everywhere, yeah? Yeah? Okay, so one of the austerities is not the language, the words themselves are not agitating to others. And another is that the message itself is pleasing. Okay, what are the other? Reciting Vedic literature. Truthful. And the most important one.
Speaking about Krishna.
Reciting Vedic literature, yeah. Most important one is beneficial. That what we say should be a benefit to ourselves and others. You can have things that are true, pleasing, not agitating based on the Vedas, but they might not benefit anybody in that particular circumstance. Make sense? Yeah. Should be beneficial. So of those five, the pleasing and not agitating have a lot to do with this mriju. And this reminds me of what we read in the Bhagavad Gita yesterday, of not being a source of distress to others. Right? He for whom no one is put into difficulty. Not causing difficulty for others. Not being cruel to others, not being harsh. And I see this as sort of a quality being refined. Or we could say being cultured, being refined. Now, by the way, are there sometimes when a pure devotee might be harsh?
When someone's saying bad things about devotees or Krishna.
Yes. We see that Prabhupada would get very angry and sometimes very harsh if people were saying that, God has no form. Or when some devotees were saying that Prabhupada was God. The only time I know when he actually told people to leave ISKCON, there were 4 sannyasis saying that Prabhupada was actually God. I mean, they came back. That's a very sweet story, actually, how they came back. But Prabhupada said, throw them out. When else might a devotee be harsh? If they're being offensive, if someone's offending God, yeah.
Under stress circumstance. Under stress.
Well, see, that's exactly what we don't see. That what you're bringing up, you came in a little late, but what you're bringing up is that a materialistic person loses good qualities under stress. Because when they're stressed, they go into fear that if I have this good quality, I'm going to be hurt. We jettison our good qualities when we become protective of ourselves. When we feel that if I keep this good quality, I won't be able to protect myself. And the level of stress that it puts us in is an indication of how advanced we are. How much stress, how much threat to ourself does it take to become harsh? If a very small threat makes us become harsh, we're not very advanced in Krishna consciousness. If it takes an extreme threat for us to become harsh, then we can understand that we've made more advancement. But when we're fully Krishna conscious, no amount of stress is going to make us become harsh. No amount of threat to ourselves. Okay, sometimes a devotee may have a service of being a fighter. Like Arjuna had to fight on the battlefield. Hanuman was fighting. And if there's a battle, you've got to be pretty harsh in the battle. It's incompatible to be mild and be fighting a battle. It doesn't work. And a lot of times what we find in the scripture is when there's a battle going on, that the soldiers will insult each other before they fight. So it's interesting, my grandson-in-law is in the military, and he was saying that when he went through his training, they said it was really military training, and talk about a cult and brainwashing. It's intense. But he was saying one of his officers said to him, the reason that we do this to you psychologically is that killing another human being from a physiological position is actually quite easy. Our bodies are very fragile. It's not very hard to kill somebody. He said, but psychologically we have a huge block against killing another human being. And the purpose of this training is to break down the psychological block so that you're able to kill others. Hare Krishna.
Wasn't Lord Ramachandra kind of displaying this non-mildness or even harshness when he had to send Sita away?
Yes, one could say that.
Is this because sort of like to follow Dharma? Is this one of the occasions when one has to?
Yeah, I think that's the Krishna's pastimes that I like the least. When Ram sends Sita away, it's probably the pastime that I like the least to talk about or think about or go there at all. But basically, Ram was demonstrating in a very extreme way that one should be willing to sacrifice one's loving family relationships for the sake of a greater cause. And of course, Arjuna had to do that also by fighting with Bhishma and Drona. In one sense, in a much more extreme way than Ram sending Sita away. But this concept that for the sake of a higher principle and the sake of a higher cause, one should be able to sacrifice anyone or anything that's dear to one. Yes. But I was thinking, the reason that the soldiers insult each other on the battlefield is they're trying to get the other person revved up to fight. Because again, to hurt another human being is not natural for us at all. But when we've been insulted, then we tend to become more aggressive. Yes? There's a whole psychology of why we become aggressive when we're insulted. Basically, we feel threatened. So this harsh language will be used sometimes by devotees if they're soldiers and they're on the battlefield.
Maybe it's making it easier to kill them.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yes, it makes it easier to kill them, and it makes it easier. Also, the standard in those days was you only fight someone who's fighting you. If somebody's not willing to fight, you don't fight them.
So we make them.
But there you are. That's what's happening. You're on the battlefield to fight. That's what's happening. So the other person may be hesitant, you may be hesitant, and by exchanging insults, people conquer their hesitancy. And they'll do what they came for. So there are certain circumstances, yes, when the devotees will be harsh, or when God appears also to be harsh. I mean, or Mahaprabhu taking sannyas also appears to be very harsh. That's another, his mother was a widow with no other children there. Her other son had left, her daughters had all died, and Mahaprabhu's wife was very young. So that also appears to be something very harsh. And sometimes when Lord Chaitanya would leave a place, the devotees would faint instead, and he'd just walk away. Or Krishna leaving Vrindavan to go to Mathura also appears very harsh.
Lord Chaitanya also kind of dismissed quite harshly one of his devotees with Chota Haridas.
Yeah, well, there were two times. One with Chota Haridas is the most extreme, which is also a very difficult pastime to read. And another is with Krishnadas, who ran off with the Bhattaharis during their travel. Lord Chaitanya kept him on to the end of his travel, but then he dismissed him. And he said, I don't want to, to travel with him anymore. And the devotees engaged him. So with Junior Haridas, it was much more extreme. Yes. So, I mean, there are some times when dealing in just a mild manner is not appropriate for service. But the devotee themselves has no tendency, and Krishna himself has no tendency to be harsh. I mean, even when the Lord displays this behavior that is apparently very harsh, it's not at all, actually.
Somebody perceives it that way.
It's perceived that way. But the devotee's inner quality, I mean, Prabhupada writes a lot about Arjuna and how Arjuna was very naturally soft-hearted and compassionate as a Vaishnava. That he wasn't just being compassionate out of family affection, but he was being compassionate because that was his nature as a devotee, not to be harsh. That neither the Lord nor the devotee has any inclination to cause any harm to others or to cause any distress to others. And sometimes it's done with great regret because there's something else that needs to be accomplished, and it's required, but it's with regret on their part. Any other one of these qualities? Yes.
Something that sometimes missed is friendly, because sometimes our spiritual life becomes introspective and we forget about, at least my observation, forget that we're supposed to be friendly too.
Okay, so where's the friendly one?
Through. Top of the second page.
Top of the second page?
Third page, sorry.
Third page. Okay, top of the third page. Mitra friendly. So yeah, we have this, that Krishna is of course, Krishna says Suhridam. Hridam means the heart. Su is very dear to, so someone who's very dear to the heart. So Krishna says he's the Suhridam, Sarvabhutanam, of everyone. And it also says about the devotees, Suhridam Sarvadehinam, that of everyone, that they're a friend to them. So yeah, it isn't just about ourselves, it's about doing good for others. So when we say that we're friendly, so a friend has the benefit of their friend in mind. They want to do good for their friend. Yes, and they want to do good for their friend even if it's at some cost to themselves. And friendliness also has a feeling of some sort of sameness, that we have something in common. We have some kind of understanding, and that we see that all of us are souls. We all have that in common, and that we can understand, as Krishna says in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, I can understand other people's happiness and distress by my own experience. That I have some kind of empathy with others. And also friendliness implies some sort of equality. That I see that all souls are equal, that I'm not superior to others or inferior to others. That I see that we have this equality. So one has a mood of friendliness. Not everybody may be friendly with me, but I have a mood of friendliness towards everyone. Any other thoughts on this? On friendliness? Is there any other one somebody would like to talk about?
Without material desire?
Without material desire. So where is that one?
That's page 3.
First deck.
So, sorry, first page on the back.
Oh, okay. Mine isn't like that.
A camera.
A comma. A comma. Desireless, without material desire, free from material hankering, undisturbed by material desires. That's interesting. Kama itself just simply means desire. So akama would mean one has no desires. And again, Prabhupada explains this as because the devotee is completely satisfied, they have nothing to ask for. Just exactly like my example. You know, many years ago I was asked to do some service in Denmark to create an encyclopedia of Krishna consciousness. And one of the really nice things about that service was that I was just given everything that I needed. You know, I don't remember having to ask for anything. I was just supplied everything as far as where I was staying, and just everything was just given. And everything was just sort of taken care of automatically. I think it's the only time in my life where I had that experience to that extent. And so I was just simply absorbed in the service I was doing. I didn't have to give a moment's thought at all to anything that I needed for myself. It was just an extremely satisfying experience. So the more that we're in touch with Krishna, the more we feel like that. The more we feel like I don't have to be concerned. We had this quote yesterday where Prabhupada's saying we don't have to be concerned about our maintenance. And this is something that Jesus teaches, right? He says, just see the lilies of the field. They don't spin, they don't weave, but still they have more beautiful clothes than Solomon. And Prabhupada talks about this a lot, how the animals are getting their necessities of life. Why are we concerned about that? Now, this doesn't mean you don't have a job. Krishna also says no one can maintain their physical body without work. But the point is that one doesn't have any anxieties for this because we feel connected with Krishna, who's Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnat Udachate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishite. That he's unlimited, and if you take unlimited away from him, he's still unlimited. So when we're connected with the unlimited, all of our needs are supplied. Again, that doesn't mean that we don't do anything. It doesn't mean you just sort of sit at home staring at the wall and saying, well, Krishna is going to supply everything. I'll just sit at home staring at the wall. But it does mean that one doesn't think that they're the doer. So in this way, the more we become Krishna conscious, the less we have a desire for anything other than to please Krishna, which isn't considered exactly a desire because it's not personal. We no longer have any desires for ourselves. Why? Because everything's there. Now, in one sense, the reason this keeps being translated as free from material desire is there are spiritual desires to serve Krishna. But there is such a different quality of desire that they can be called not desires. Because kama stems from a sense of wanting that because it's not there. There's something's missing. There's some lack. When we identify with the body, okay, I have to have air, I have to have proper temperature, I have to have water, I have to have food, I have to have some kind of shelter because of temperature, because of insects, because of thieves. We have all these things that we could say we need. And many people in psychology, sociology have identified human needs, physiological needs, mental needs, social needs, intellectual needs, and so forth. But all of those sense of needs come from a sense of feeling that I'm not complete. I'm just kind of broken. And I have to have these other things coming at me. But if I'm connected with Krishna, I don't feel broken anymore. I feel part of the complete whole. So I'm also full. And wanting to please somebody out of a sense of fullness is very different than wanting to get something out of a sense of emptiness. You can say they're both wants. Like let's say you were fabulously rich, like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or people like that. So it could be that those people want more money, I don't know. But let's just say theoretically that they don't feel that they want more money. If they have a desire how to spend their money, that's more, okay, I want to use what I have like Bill Gates does all this charity work. Right? He's really committed to charity. So his desire to spend his money to do good for others is different than I'm saying I want to do things for myself. I want to do things to make money for myself. It's a little bit of a material example. That he's in a position where he couldn't possibly spend all of the money he has on himself. It's just actually impossible. He couldn't actually, he could build more houses than he could even see or something, but as far as, you just can't. You couldn't spend it fast enough and on enough things. So you could say that a person like that, they don't have any desires, just in terms of money at least, they don't have any desires for themselves, but they might have a desire to give. So that's a little bit of an idea. That if on every level all of our desires were completely fulfilled and continuously, not as a one-time thing, but like a continuous fulfillment of all of our desires automatically. Not necessarily the external form, but the underlying reason why we want some. Like, why do we want money? We want money to feel secure. We want money to feel powerful. We want money to get pleasures. Right? So if we had security and power and pleasures, we wouldn't need the cash. Yeah? You understand? So I'm saying all of our desires are fulfilled. It doesn't necessarily mean you have the red sports car you wanted. But it means that what was pushing you to have the red sports car is taken care of. The things for which you hope the red sports car would make you feel satisfied, that's taken care of. And so the desires just become, what am I going to do with this infinite stream that I'm tapping into? So those sort of desires are not exactly kama. So Krishnadas Kaviraj says, one is kama, one is prema. So the devotees have desires, but their desires are in prema. And they're very categorically different from the desires of kama. Anyone have any other thoughts on akama? Another one? Yes?
Yes, page 3, number 7, Daksa.
Daksha. Oh. Okay, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and where Prabhupada says that the devotee should be daksha, meaning that they should know something of everything and everything of something. And he said that even though we're in Krishna consciousness, we shouldn't be callous to material expertise.
Yeah.
So just like we have a restaurant here, so the cooks are supposed to be expert cooks. Not that, well, I'm a devotee, I don't care about being an expert cook. So I was once in a temple where actually twice in 2 different temples, but one was more extreme than the other, where the people in the kitchen didn't care about being expert cooks. And so this one cook who didn't care about being an expert cook, she made avocado halva. And she made this vegetable preparation. Do you all know what plantains are? Do you ever get them here? Cooking bananas? So she just cut the cooking bananas in half. So they're big chunks. And then there was eggplant. Do you call that eggplant here? Yeah. And red cabbage. It was red cabbage, eggplant. You call that aubergine? Is that what you call it here?
Yeah.
Huh? Aubergine. Aubergine. So red cabbage, aubergine, and cooking bananas. Boiled. No. So one should be expert. Whatever we're doing, whether it's cooking, whether it's cleaning, whether it's running a business, designing a web page, whatever we're doing, taking care of our family members, we should learn to do it expertly. Which means that we should also get some training in that art. We should perfect our craft. So all of us that have some broad general knowledge, we shouldn't be such specialists that we can only do our own little specialty. We don't have any other broad general knowledge, but then we should become expert in some specialty. And of course that's necessary just if you want to have a happy society materially, that people's natures should be ascertained when they're young, and then they should be trained to be expert in their field. And so basically by the time everybody's 15 to 20 years old, they should be an expert in their field. That would be an ideal society. People would be much happier. Nowadays you have people that are 35 and they're like, I have no idea what my nature is and what I want to do and who I am, which is very unfortunate. So even if you just want to talk about being happy materially, which would involve varnashram, then you want to be expert in your field. You want to be expert in your livelihood, and you want to be expert in your stage of life. So if you're a student, you want to know how to be an expert student, how to have good study skills and so forth. When you get married, you want to be an expert spouse and parent. Then when you go into retirement and preparing for death, you want to become expert in that. So the materialists want to do that so that they can get more pleasure out of their activities, and we want to do that because we're doing it for Krishna. Why do I want to give Krishna avocado halwa? It's just not nice. It's not, yes, Vidura was in ecstasy, and so he handed Krishna the banana peels instead of the bananas. But that's a different. That was, It's like when the gopis were so anxious to see Krishna that they put their saris on upside down. When I first read that when I was in university, I thought they put their skirts on their head. I couldn't make it out, but once I understood sari has this part here. It's called the palum. It's different. The other side that we tuck in is just plain. And so putting your saris in upside down would be you put this part, you tuck that in. Sometimes you see people who aren't expert at putting on saris, you see they've done that. They put it on upside down. Or like some of the saris that have embroidery, it has a front side and a back side. Like the underside has just the little threads. And so you'll see people, they put their saris on inside out. And sometimes they're inside out and upside down. So that was a measure of love for Krishna, because normally if a young girl is going to see a young boy that she loves, she's going to spend a lot of time making sure that she looks really good. So for a young girl going to see a boy that she loves, to be so anxious to see him that she puts her clothes on upside down and inside out. Krishna was very charmed by that. He was really charmed. That they were just so anxious that they neglected what would be the most important thing for a young girl. They put only one earring on, and they only decorated one eye, and they put their belt on their feet. And so sometimes devotees display a lack of expertise out of some sort of loving ecstasy. But generally, if we're going to do some service, Prabhupada said, one should do the best. One should do the best simply for Krishna's pleasure. That should be our motive. And everything we do should be first class. And that may mean that we study something. Think of that. It means maybe we get some training in what we're doing. This is starting to really come into ISKCON. We now have a GBC college to train ISKCON leaders. I've taught there. We have our leadership course. I just taught a course in Radhadesh about how to give classes, how to teach. We have our teacher training course. We have an art institute. We have a deity worship institute. We have cooking institute. So we're starting to understand that we should train people in their field and in their service. We have in Radhadesh, we have a degree program in business. Arjuna was so into becoming expert, he was practicing at night. He was practicing shooting at night. Any other thoughts on being expert?
Just a mentality towards each part of our service. What came to my mind first of all was this inner japa. Just to try and constantly be at our best, or trying to perfect, whether that requires training or endeavour or concentration, that not that we accept this is the level we're at, but we're always trying to get more expertise at it.
Very nice. Any other qualities somebody would like to talk about?
Apramata.
What?
Apramata, sanity.
Sanity. Without inebriation, not influenced by the Lord's illusory energy, never mad after material identity. That's an interesting translation. Sane and cautious and sober. So, of course, this means literally not taking any sort of intoxicant. And I would imagine that those of you who work in Ireland, this is probably a challenge in your work environment. In every culture of the world, there's some socially accepted intoxicants, but in certain countries, intoxicants are very much part of the work culture. And I've heard that that's particularly true in this country. And one is expected in a work environment to go out drinking. So there's other countries like that too, where if you say, I don't drink, that people are kind of, what's wrong with you? So it certainly means that one isn't artificially clouding one's consciousness. We're trying to raise ourselves to a higher level of consciousness. But also here, this is defined as not being influenced by the illusory energy or material identity, which is a kind of intoxication. It's a kind of madness. Just like people who have mental illness, sometimes they think they're somebody else. Right? They're usually some famous person. So they don't have their proper identity. So if we're thinking, I'm this body, I'm this mind, I'm this nationality, I have this, I'm a son, I'm a daughter, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a banker. If this is how we're defining ourselves, then that is a kind of illness, actually. It's an illusion. If we're defining ourselves, we can understand by those labels what service we should be doing for Krishna, but that's very different than thinking that that's myself. And as soon as I'm thinking that that's myself, then all my activities become distorted. It's like a person under the influence of some sort of intoxicant, that all their activities become distorted. That's why people take intoxicants. They want their perception to be distorted. That's the whole purpose of the thing. So, as soon as I'm thinking I am something other than what I am, it changes all my relationships, changes my relationship with myself, it changes my relationship with other people, it changes my relationship with things. I'm not seeing things as they are. I'm seeing things through a distorted lens. But this giving up of this material identity, this intoxication material identity, it definitely operates on a subtle and deep level. And I think it's especially difficult because those identities do, to some extent, define what service the Lord is asking us to do in this world. If you have children, then you have a service to God to take care of those children. Not because you are the biological parent or the adoptive parent, but because it's your duty to God. But it's so difficult to do it just as a duty to God without ever falling into the thing that I'm doing it because I'm the father and I'm doing it because I'm the mother. But if I'm taking care of the child because I'm the father or because I'm the mother, then I'm intoxicated. And then my judgment about how to act is impeded. But if I'm saying this is a service that Krishna's giving, then I'm doing it without intoxication. But it's a subtle and deep thing. I tell you, it's not easy. To act just on the platform that I'm a soul, not act on the platform of my material identity. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I have a question on that. I hope I can express it properly. The concept of sahajism, that we try to act on the level that
we're not.
That we're not. So that can also apply within any of these qualities, yeah?
It certainly can. And to start where you are is a very important principle. You have to start where you are. I mean, that sounds just obvious, but a lot of people try to start from where they're not.
It's a mistake I made definitely in my younger spiritual life, assuming that I was further ahead than I was, and when reality caught up, it was a different...
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought up this point, because just like if we're going to give someone directions how to come here, the first thing we ask them is, where are you? If you go online or, with any of the direction programs and you want directions someplace, it has to know your current location. It's absolutely essential. If you have your GPS turned off and you ask for directions, it can't give you proper directions. I mean, the beauty of the GPS is that it can ascertain where you are, which of course is a little scary.
Yes.
I always find it a little scary. That it knows exactly where I am,
Within 5 meters.
5 meters.
Depends.
That's pretty exact. But I do find that a little scary.
That really
I get this thing once a month from Google that it shows a map of where I've gone in the last month. You guys get that? You can get that. If you don't get it in your inbox, you can just get it. If you zoom in on it, it can show you exactly like where you went within a city or something. But the point is, it can't give you directions unless it knows where you are. And so we can't know how to progress unless we know where we are. But the purpose of knowing where we are is not so we can stay where we are. The purpose of knowing where we are is so we can know how to take the next step. Because depending on where I am, depends on do I turn right, left, or go straight. If I give the wrong location, I'll get the wrong instruction. So the purpose of knowing where I am is not to be complacent and just to say, well, this is where I am. But to say, oh, now I know how to move forward. So if I, and it's also interesting you say this because I had an experience some years ago where I was speaking to a devotee who was conflating Varnashram with Krishna consciousness. He was saying Varnashram and Krishna consciousness are exactly the same thing. And I was doing that, I would say, a very good job of convincing him that that was not true. And we got to the point that he was almost convinced. I mean, he was like right next to being convinced. And then Super Soul in my heart said, stop what you're doing. And what I could understand is that the way this person was motivating himself was through his material identity. And that if I was able, which I was just about to be able to do, I was right, I could feel it. If I was able to break that for him, he would become irresponsible. That at that particular point, he needed that material identification in order to motivate. So I left it alone. It was a very big lesson for me. And Bhaktivinoda writes in Bhakti Loka, and I think also Chaitanya Shikshamrita, about Niyamagraha. And he says there are different steps, and in each step the rules are somewhat different. He says the problem is don't go too fast and don't go too slowly. Just like on the road, if you go too fast, you'll cause an accident. But if you go too slowly, you'll also cause an accident. So he said one will fall if one goes too fast and or too slowly. And he says that one should be constantly trying to go to the next step. And once you go to the next step, you have to give up the rules of the previous step, or they will act as chains around your feet. So knowing where I am means, okay, let me look up. I can look at the top of the stairs. Right now with this, we're looking at the top of the stairs. But there are also intermediate steps. So I want to look at the top, but I also want to look at what is the next intermediate step for me. And work at taking that step, which will mean letting go of something that I'm holding on to right now. It will mean accepting something and letting go of something. Now, we don't have to take every single step. We can be picked up by the Lord and carried all the way to the top of the staircase very quickly. That is also possible. But artificially pretending to be at a higher step than one is. I think this is something that's encouraged in society in general. You know, not just in the Hare Krishna movement, but it is also something definitely that it's a problem for us. That I don't think we mean to, but I think with all good intentions, we actually encourage people to be phony. I don't think it's deliberate on anybody's part at all.
Social expectation.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate
Does it not lead into the value of truthfulness? And truthfulness really begins with inside yourself.
Yes, and we'll talk about that a little bit in our second seminar today in terms of speaking confidentially with other people. Being truthful doesn't mean that you advertise all of your faults. You don't have to get a website and list on it every bad thing you've ever done or thought or whatever.
Sometimes we imagine the truth means outside, but actually it was not.
Yes, it means primarily inside.
Primarily inside.
It means primarily with Krishna, who already knows the truth anyway. It really means being honest with Krishna, who's saying, I already know all this. You're not going to surprise me with any of it, and I still love you anyway. So it's totally okay. It has to be okay to be where we are. Again, these things, it sounds ridiculous even to have to say it.
Yeah.
It's okay to be where you are. Well, duh. It has to be okay to be where I am because that's where I am. How can it not be okay to be where I am? I mean, it doesn't make the slightest bit of sense. It's not okay to be where you are. What am I supposed to do? it's, it puts me in an untenable situation where I have to then lie. Okay, fine, I'll pretend I'm not here. But yeah, as soon as we do that, we cannot make any progress. I realized this as a teacher, that I had a student who came from a country, which I shall not name, where due to corruption in the government, I believe this is the reason, that due to corruption in the government, people learn to cheat at a very young age. And cheating is so endemic in that culture that people don't identify it as cheating. That what I would understand to be cheating, people from that particular country don't identify as cheating at all. I remember one time when I was visiting that country, people told me I have to put aside some money every week to pay the police officers bribes because they'll pull me over when I haven't done anything wrong and they want a bribe. Anyway, so the student, very nice girl, she turned in a paper that was complete plagiarism. You know what plagiarism is? It was just copied from something. And at first when I read it, I thought, this is really good. Your writing's really improved. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this is really familiar. I've read this before. And I realized it was in one of our books. She just copied it out of the book. And what I understood then was that marking up that paper was no value. As a teacher, you take a red pen, yeah? And you mark up the paper and you say, this is good, this is not good. And I thought, my marking this paper has no teaching value. Because it's not her. So I can't tell her how to improve or what she's doing well because it isn't her. That was like a real, whoa, that's why you can't cheat. So yeah, what we need to do with something like this, having a material identity. I mean, if the only reason I'm taking care of my kids is because I'm the father, I'm the mother, okay, but to understand that having that as my motive, having that as my driving force, that I have a bodily relationship with this person. Through my body, I've called this person into the world. Therefore, I have a responsibility for them. That's going to set you up for problems. Because as soon as we have a material identity, we have certain expectations. Not only of ourselves, but of others. My son has to treat me in a certain way because he's my son. He owes me. I've done this, and therefore he owes me. And I'm measuring myself by, am I a good father? And I'm not going to be a good father all the time. I'm not going to be a good father all the time by my own criteria, and I'm certainly not going to be a good father all the time by my children's criteria. That's not going to happen. Even if they're two, they're going to sometimes tell you that you're not acting as a good father according to their criteria. Definitely. What to speak of when they're 22 or 42. Well, definitely. They might not tell you. I mean, when they're two, they'll tell you. I hate you, Daddy. You took away my toy. They'll tell you. They might not tell you when they're 42. But our sense of happiness then comes from whether or not my children agree that I'm a good father. You can't get them to always agree. Sorry, it doesn't work. And this causes a lot of anger and frustration. I've sacrificed so much for you, I've done so much for you, and you're not grateful, you're not reciprocating, you're not treating me right. Why does that bother us? Because it threatens our identity. I'm a good father. It threatens my very sense of existence. But if that's not my sense of identity, if that's not my sense of existence, if I'm just trying to be a good servant of Krishna, Krishna is pleased by the intention and the effort. He's not that concerned about the result. So if your kid's angry with you because you took his fire truck that he was hitting his brother over the head with, your kid's not going to be happy with you, I guarantee you that. But Krishna can be happy with you. And if my sense of identity is I'm a soul that's trying to please Krishna, Krishna's given me this job to do. On Monday at 10 o'clock, my son may say, I love you, Daddy. And on Monday at 10:30, he may say, I hate you, Daddy. But it doesn't really matter because Krishna's pleased with me. And also, the one identity is coming, first of all, it's false. I'm not this body. Second of all, it's coming from this idea of, other people have to certify that it's true. And then it's coming from this idea of lack, that other people have to deal with me in a certain way for me to be happy. So at least if we can understand that theoretically. and start to come to the platform of, wait a minute, I'm doing this to please Krishna. I'm doing this to please Krishna. I'm not doing it to please my kid. I'm just not doing it to please my kid. Sometimes I may be pleased, sometimes I may not be pleased, but that's not what's going on here. Now, Krishna wants me to treat my child in a particular way, which looks exactly like the way a good father would treat their child. So to the world, I'll look like, oh, that's a really good father. But I'm like, I'm not a father. I'm not anybody's father. That's not what's motivating me. But for people on the lower platform, if you take that away, oh, I'm not the father, great, I'm out of here, bye. What do I have to hang around taking you as a kid for if I'm not the father? Okay, bye-bye. So, on a certain level, you have to talk about this as standards of morals and ethics according to your identity. That's what Varnashram is all about. Who are you materially? Okay, what are your set of corresponding dharma according to your material identity? Follow that in order to be happy in the world and to go to heaven. But spiritually, dharma and parityajya, that's not why I'm doing it. Anyway, at least to work on that. At least to work on that. And especially we can work on that when it's obvious, especially when we get frustrated with ourselves or with others. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I frustrated because of the way my kid is behaving, or am I frustrated because I'm operating from the platform of a material identity? What's actually frustrating me here? And if I were trying to act according to a spiritual identity, what would I do differently? How would I respond differently? So that can be taking a step up. But knowing this is where I want to go. I want to go to the platform where I'm operating according to my spiritual identity, where my satisfaction comes from Krishna, not from my kid. Where my kid's behavior doesn't define me. It's not the source of my happiness. It's not the source of my satisfaction. It's not the source of my pride or embarrassment and shame or whatever. But my satisfaction is coming from another source. Is that all right?
Yeah. I just found the lines slightly blurred when I put the same concept where it's easy to separate it in material life and spiritual life, where you're identifying with the body, you're identifying with a certain Krishna. But when you put the same identity into a spiritual organization, when you start to identify with my advancement in the status as been a spiritual advancement as opposed to actually advancing. I had a personal issue when I was been encouraged for Brahminical initiation because I was a leader within and I was like, I'm not ready. But there was an expectation on the outside, and we've probably seen it historically with sannyasa and a few other occasions where there was a push. And from it, my hard lesson to learn, which I just so I want to speak about, was just to thyself you have to be true.
Yes.
And above and beyond, sometimes even if it looked like you're spiritually advancing, because now you're Brahminical, if you're not Brahminical inside, you're not Brahminical regardless of your initiation. You know?
Yes.
And I think it's a very good ground to stand on in your beginning of your spiritual life, that learning how to be truly honest with yourself and not regarding external spiritual status as advancement.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I mean, the Bhagavatam talks about the truthful devotee, and a word that means devotee is satam, someone who's very truthful. Now that doesn't just mean that you always speak the truth to everybody about everything. You don't have to tell a mother that her baby's ugly if the baby's ugly. That's not what we mean. But we mean that that you're very authentic with yourself. And again, that doesn't mean you have to go and tell everybody what all your problems are, but it means that you see yourself authentically, you deal with Krishna authentically, and you move from that platform, that you're not, that we don't get pulled into the status of an institution. It's, without having some kind of sangha of spiritual practitioners, it's very hard to make advancement on our own. But as soon as you have a sangha of spiritual practitioners, you start having social conventions of human beings. How do you avoid it? It's and this is a problem in every kind of religious or spiritual organization, that the social conventions of human beings can start to operate kind of on their own power, with their own momentum, and then the institution becomes just like any other mundane institution with a little like one of these fake fruit juices with a drop of real fruit juice in it. One drop of essential oil from orange in a whole gallon of water. And it tends to happen to any religious and spiritual organizations. The Dharma turns into adharma. It happens all the time. And it's something, it's like one has to clean one's room and clean one's clothes and clean one's body regularly. You can't say, well, I showered a month ago, that's enough, And it's the same way with the organization. We have to, we can't just say, well, Prabhupada founded this organization and therefore, and it's his body, and so therefore, that's it. It's something that especially the leaders, but all of us as members, have to be, wait a minute, that keeping the purity and keeping the direction is something that all of us, ISKCON is us. It's not something outside of ourselves. And keeping that authenticity. And because it's going to be a tendency, whenever there's a group of people getting together, to move in the other direction. Just what it is. It's like there's a tendency of our bodies and our movements and our clothes to get dirty. There's a tendency of food to rot. It's just where we are. So we should be very, very careful of, in our own society, equating ashram status with spirituality, equating years in the movement with spirituality, equating managerial position with spirituality. Those are traps. In Manashiksha, in the verse about bathing with donkey urine and thinking you're going to get clean. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives the example that if you think I'm in a renounced ashram, therefore I'm spiritually advanced. And I see that we've institutionalized this. Those in the renounced ashrams are more spiritually advanced. It's just not true. So, but this is something we all have to be on guard about all the time. And this doesn't mean that we don't have particular etiquette and social interaction, but that we realize that spiritual advancement has nothing to do with that at all. Jayananda, who Prabhupada said that we should celebrate at the day of his passing, the anniversary of his death, like we celebrate that of any of the saints. He could never pronounce Sanskrit properly. And he did, he was a tel president for a year and a half, but he did things like build the Rath Yatra cart and take out the trash and go buying the vegetables. And when he would build the Rath Yatra carts, he would engage homeless people in helping. He'd go to buy the fruits and vegetables, and all the guys at the places that he would buy from, they called him Johnny Ananda, and they all loved him. But he was doing very menial work. But he was a saint. There's one story about him where a devotee who first came to visit the temple where Janananda was. And the tel president said, hey, can you help Janananda with the trash? He takes care of the trash. This devotee went to help Janananda, and he decided, if the garbage men here are so blissful, definitely I want to join this stuff. So, I think a crisis of faith that I've been through, and I see a lot of other people go through, is where someone who has a titled position is revealed as having some sort of spiritual trouble. And then we have this crisis because we think, well, if you have the title attached to you, you must be more saintly. And one of the ways that we get through that crisis is to say, wait a minute, these things there's no equivalency.
Sure.
There just isn't an equivalency.
It becomes a trap for that individual.
It can become a trap for that individual, yes. That they feel they have to project some atmosphere of saintliness that's not theirs. And, we've heard that. Well, I can't admit to things because... What I've found personally as a teacher of Krishna consciousness, again, it's not that I'm going to bore you with, you know, a 1,000-page book of all my faults. But I have found that by being reasonably transparent about my own faults, that I'm in a much better position to be able to help other people. You know, that first of all, people understand that I'm real, that I'm, you know, living, breathing human being. And second of all, that way you can model for people. All right, look, this is something that I'm struggling with. And I'm sure some people who hear me say those things think, oh, she's just saying that. That's not true. But that's not true. If I talk about things I'm struggling with, it's because I'm actually struggling with them. And I found that to be much, much more effective. I found it better for me. It helps keep me out of that idea that, you know, I'm some kind of, that just because I'm sitting here and you're sitting there, that I'm more in Krishna consciousness than you. You know, as a teacher of children in the Hare Krishna movement, it was something that I reminded myself of frequently throughout the day. That a lot of the children I was teaching were probably more spiritually realized than I was, which was true. You know, externally I had to be the teacher. It's not that just because they were more spiritually realized, I could say, okay, you teach the lesson on the difference between gerunds and participles. Or even that I could say, well, you're more spiritually realized, you manage the classroom discipline. Children who are very spiritually realized may still sometimes have temper tantrums. So, you know, it's not that I could take that kind of position, but to keep in mind that just because I'm physically older, you know, and I know the difference between participles and gerunds, doesn't mean that I'm more spiritually advanced than this child. Yeah.
Can you clarify then, do I understand correctly from what you were just saying, like about sati and truthfulness, that quality is more in relation to your being true to yourself and in your relationship to Krishna, with Krishna, as opposed to external truthfulness?
Definitely. I mean, we should also have external truthfulness. I'm not saying that we should be liars and cheaters. But sometimes it's better to be silent than to speak the truth. First of all, what I understand to be the truth externally might not be. It's always good to have some very practical humility. And, you know, maybe I'm not seeing things accurately. It's not that any time I think that there's some truth that someone needs to hear, that, first of all, that I really understand the truth, and second of all, is it my business to tell them.
Well, that's clear, sort of, you can keep silent, not necessarily like speak out the truth, harsh truth, whatever.
Yes.
But how about, is it in Bhagavad Gita, I think Srila Prabhupada in his commentaries talking about Varnashram.
And he talks about the Vaishyas that may have to lie to stay in business. I think that's, you know, that's also true for people in government. You know, if you're running government, you sometimes have to lie for diplomacy. You know, it may be a question of telling a lie or having your citizens blown up. You know, it's simply not possible to run a government and always be truthful. We all know that. Nobody expects our politicians to be 100% truthful externally. It's not possible. Or Prabhupada says sometimes as a parent, you know, you have to give the kids some medicine and, you know, you may lie to them. It'll be okay, it won't taste too bad. You know, sometimes it's just necessary in order to do one's job. But in general, we should be externally truthful. But yeah, if you go to a shop, they're not telling you how much money they're making on everything. We would all be scandalized. Yeah.
And Krishna ordering, telling Yudhishthira to say a lie as well.
Can I guess that you happen to be a very moral and ethical person? Just from what you brought up is my guess.
No, I don't think so.
Or at least that it's very important to you. It's sort of a conundrum, because the rules of morals and ethics and truthfulness come from Krishna himself. There's something that he wants. At the same time, what he ultimately wants is something beyond that. What he ultimately wants is something that's love and caring. And therefore, of the 5 parts of speech, beneficial is more important than truthfulness. Which sometimes means being silent, and it sometimes means presenting something in a way that's not going to hurt somebody. And speaking truth that's going to harm people, in one sense you could say that that's not actually truth at all. Because the Sanskrit words for truth and the Sanskrit words for good are the same. So if something's true from an objective position, but it's going to cause great harm to somebody, and it's not necessary for them to know the objective truth in their life.
Is this why we do or didn't tell?
Yes, exactly.
Just
That's
be
right.
kind,
To be kind, because to be beneficial and to be kind. See, generally we lie not to be kind. Generally we lie to protect ourselves and our interests. And we may say we're doing it to be kind, but actually we're doing it to protect our false material identity. And to protect the things that we want to enjoy in this world. So that kind of lying should never be done, actually. Now again, you have to start where you are, so sometimes you may not be able to do that completely. It may put you into a panic. But ultimately, we should not ever be untruthful simply to protect our false identity and our material interests. But we sometimes have to present things in a way that's kind to others. It's absolutely necessary. You know, it is actually absolutely necessary. We don't have the right to damage somebody else in the name of being truthful. It's just, and that's not ultimate truth anyway. Ultimate truth is about love. But again, I think many times we excuse our lack of truthfulness on the plea of being kind to others when actually we're just worried about our own stuff. And therefore, the ultimate truthfulness is with ourselves. What's my real motive? You know, what's my motive? What am I afraid of? Because most of the time that we're not truthful, there's some kind of fear. But it's interesting, I think it was with Maharaj Prithu, it said like he never disclosed his treasury to anyone. Janaka Pandit says don't disclose your plans. So there's also some things that are supposed to be kept confidential just with certain trusted people. And that's also a principle.
Is this just not to provoke people to commit?
To be envious?
Yeah.
Well, just like we were talking on the island about Tim, who brings like yoga groups, and he was talking about how he presents Krishna consciousness, and I said if you present something higher than a person can understand, that's an offense. So if I say something to someone that they can't digest, it's like if I give you food that you can't digest and you become sick. So if I give you information or knowledge that you're not capable of digesting, then you'll become offensive. So that's not to be done. So what I find, what I try to do is be truthful in a way that people are able to accept and able to digest and able to benefit from. And not speak truths that people aren't ready for or can't digest. And if I do speak truths that people aren't ready for, it's almost always due to my own pride. It's a way of my saying I'm better than you. You know, if I speak some truth that another person can't accept and then they react badly, I can take their reacting badly as indicative that I'm a better person than they are. I mean, sometimes we speak truth somebody isn't ready for just because we just don't know what they're ready for. But then we should step back. Because it's almost always prideful. Oh, I know more than you, or I see more than you, or I can handle this better than you can. Is that all right? These are. We're not going to come up with a rule book. And in fact, if we did, we would greatly damage our spiritual organization. That becomes a bureaucracy, which is the antithesis of an organic living organization. So we're not going to find out with a rule book about truthfulness what should you say, what should you do in every possible situation, and you just look up in the book and then you just follow it. It's much more a matter of to what extent am I in Sattva Guna or in Bhakti? Because in Sattva Guna, Krishna says you can see what is to be done, what is not to be done, what is binding, what is liberating, what is to be feared, what is not to be feared. In Rajagun, sometimes you see it right, sometimes you don't. And in Tamagun, it's all backwards. In Tamagun, you think what's good is bad and what's bad is good. So I think it's Garuda Prabhu, my godbrother, who compares it. Tamagun is like you have the curtains over the window. And then Rajagun, it's like you have a translucent window, like you have in a shower room. Sattva Guna is you have a clear window. Bhakti is you're outside. So knowing how to act in different situations depends on the clarity of our own consciousness within. If I've got a heavy blanket over my consciousness, I haven't the vaguest idea how to behave. If it's kind of translucent, I have somewhat an idea. If I've got a clear window, I've got a pretty good idea. I'm usually going to get it right. And if I have no restrictions on my consciousness, then Prabhupada says our duties are self-illuminated by the Lord. That we know exactly how to deal with people. And sometimes we can say things that may appear to be very harsh. But if it's a person who can handle it and needs it and will respond well to it, then that's a very loving and kind and caring thing. And other times there are people we have to be extremely careful and gentle with. I was just thinking of a friend who came to me years ago and said, Urmila, what's my biggest problem? And her biggest problem was obvious to everyone in the community. But I said to her, you don't have any problems. So she kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I said to her, you really don't have any problems. If you have a problem, it's something very minor. You really don't have to worry about it. Anyway, so finally I told her, but I tried to couch it like that. She went ballistic on me. 3 weeks of just email after email and phone call after phone call, and how dare you say I have this problem? And I thought, last time I'm going to be honest with you, lady. And I had really tried to soften it. So after that experience with her, whenever she asked me something, I would just lie, frankly. I would say, you're fine, you're doing fine. So, that there has to be some discretion, because ultimately being authentic is what is the genuine way of helping this person? How can I genuinely help this person where they are? Not where I'd like them to be or where I think they should be, but where they are. What is this person ready to accept where they are? Is that all right? And that's much more of an intuitive, connected, realized thing than a set of ethical rules. And also it may be different from one person. Maybe another person could have told her and she would have reacted well. Maybe it was just my relationship with her. So that's also sometimes the case. Sometimes I can hear heavy truth from one person and I can't hear it from somebody else. So also being authentic is saying, maybe I'm not the right person. We can talk about this a little bit more with speaking confidentially in the next session. So right now we need a break. So if we could take a break till 12:30. And please actually move and stretch. Thank you.